My name is Dorothy Chen, and at 68 years old, I never expected to become a grandmother to a 7-year-old girl with blonde curls and bright blue eyes who calls me Grandma Dot in a voice that makes my heart sing. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you open your heart to possibilities you never imagined. I'm sitting in my car outside Riverside Elementary School, checking my appearance in the rearview mirror before heading into Grandparents' Day. It's a crisp October morning in 2023, and I'm wearing my best navy blue dress, the one I bought for my nephew's wedding last year, along with the pearl necklace my late husband James gave me for our 25th anniversary. I want to look perfect for Lily. Lily Martinez isn't my biological granddaughter. She came into my life 18 months ago in the most unexpected way possible, through a chance encounter at the grocery store that changed both our lives forever. I was retired then, as I am now, after 30 years of teaching high school English in San Francisco. My husband James had passed away 3 years earlier from complications related to diabetes, and I was struggling with the loneliness that comes with losing your life partner after 42 years of marriage. We'd never had children of our own, a choice we'd made early in our marriage that seemed right at the time, but left me feeling adrift in my golden years. I'd moved to the small town of Cedar Ridge, California, 6 months after James died, seeking a fresh start somewhere quieter, more peaceful. I bought a small house on Elm Street with a garden where I could grow the vegetables James had always loved, and I tried to build a new life for myself. But quiet can sometimes feel like lonely, and peaceful can sometimes feel like empty. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2022, when I was shopping for groceries at Miller's Market and heard a little girl crying in the cereal aisle. She was maybe 5 years old, with tangled blonde hair and tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. She was wearing clothes that had seen better days, a too small pink t-shirt and jeans with holes in the knees, and she was alone. "Sweetie," I said, kneeling down to her level, "are you okay? Where's your grown-up?" "I can't find my mama," she sobbed. "She told me to stay by the cart, but then I saw the Lucky Charms and I wanted to show her, and now I can't find her anywhere." My teacher instincts kicked in immediately. "Okay, honey, let's find your mama together. What's your name?" "Lily," she sniffled. "Lily Martinez." "Well, Lily Martinez, I'm Mrs. Chen, and I'm very good at finding lost mamas. Can you tell me what your mama looks like?" As Lily described her mother, she has brown hair and a ponytail and she's wearing a red sweater. I gently took her hand and guided her toward the front of the store. But before we could reach the customer service desk, a young woman came running around the corner, her face pale with panic. "Lily! Oh my God, Lily, there you are!" The woman, clearly Lily's mother, dropped to her knees and pulled the little girl into a fierce hug. "You scared me so much, baby. I told you to stay by the cart." "I'm sorry, Mama. I just wanted to show you the cereal with the marshmallows." The young woman looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you so much for staying with her. I'm Maria Martinez. I turned around for 2 seconds to grab something from the top shelf, and she was gone. "I'm Dorothy Chen," I said, extending my hand. "And it's no problem at all. These things happen." But as I looked at Maria more closely, I could see that she was exhausted in a way that went beyond just the scare of losing track of her daughter. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her red sweater, which Lily had described so accurately, was worn thin at the elbows. Her grocery cart contained mostly generic brands and discount items, the choices of someone stretching every dollar. "Are you new to Cedar Ridge?" I asked, making conversation while Lily clung to her mother's legs. "We moved here about a month ago," Maria said, standing up and brushing Lily's hair back from her face. "I got a job at the diner downtown, and we needed a fresh start." There was something in the way she said fresh start that suggested she was running from something, though I didn't pry. As a teacher, I'd learned to recognize the signs of families in transition, families who'd left difficult circumstances behind in search of something better. "Well, welcome to Cedar Ridge," I said warmly. "It's a lovely little town. Very quiet, very safe." "Thank you," Maria said, but she seemed distracted, eager to finish her shopping and leave. I might have left it at that, a brief encounter with strangers, quickly forgotten. But as I was loading my groceries into my car 20 minutes later, I saw Maria and Lily in the parking lot, standing next to an old Honda Civic that clearly wasn't starting. Maria had the hood up and was staring at the engine with the helpless expression of someone who knew nothing about cars. Lily was sitting on the curb, swinging her legs and humming to herself, seemingly unbothered by their predicament. "Car trouble?" I asked, approaching them. Maria looked up, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "It's been making this weird noise for weeks, and now it just won't turn over. I don't suppose you know anything about cars?" "A little," I said, though that was being generous. "But I know someone who does. Tony at Cedar Ridge Auto is honest and fair. Would you like me to call him for you?" I'm not sure I can afford a tow truck," Maria admitted quietly. "Don't worry about that right now," I said, already pulling out my phone. "Let's just get you some help." While we waited for Tony, Lily and I sat on the curb together. She told me about her favorite TV shows, her stuffed elephant named Peanut, and how she was going to start kindergarten in the fall. Maria paced nearby, clearly stressed about the cost of whatever was wrong with her car. When Tony arrived, he diagnosed the problem quickly. A dead battery and some corroded cables, nothing too expensive to fix. But I could see the relief on Maria's face when he quoted a price that was apparently within her budget. "Mrs. Chen," she said as Tony worked on the car, "I can't thank you enough. You didn't have to help us." "Of course I did," I said simply. "That's what neighbors do." "But we're not really neighbors. We're just people you met in the grocery store." I looked at Lily, who was now helping Tony by holding his flashlight and chattering about her stuffed elephant, and then at Maria, who was watching her daughter with the fierce protective love that only mothers possess. "Well," I said, "maybe we could be neighbors, or at least friends." That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, Maria and I developed an easy friendship. She was 26 years old, a single mother who'd left an abusive relationship in Phoenix and come to Cedar Ridge hoping to build a safe, stable life for herself and Lily. She worked long shifts at the diner, often coming home exhausted, trying to balance supporting her daughter with being present for her. I started offering to watch Lily occasionally, just for an hour or two when Maria had to work late or when she needed to run errands. Lily was a delightful child, curious and affectionate, hungry for attention and stories, and the kind of patient interaction that busy single mothers don't always have time to provide. "Mrs. Chen," Lily said one afternoon while we were baking cookies in my kitchen, "do you have any grandkids?" "No, sweetheart," I said, helping her measure flour. "Mr. Chen and I never had children of our own." "That's sad," Lily said with the straightforward honesty of a 5-year-old. "You would be a really good grandma." "Thank you, Lily. That's very sweet of you to say." "Maybe," she said thoughtfully, "maybe you could be my extra grandma. Like, I know my real grandma lives far away in Mexico and I never get to see her. But maybe you could be my here grandma." My heart melted completely. "I would be honored to be your here grandma." "Can I call you Grandma Dot?" "I would love that." And so, at 67 years old, I became a grandmother. Not through biology or marriage or legal adoption, but through choice and love and the simple miracle of two people needing what the other could offer. Over the next year, my relationship with both Maria and Lily deepened. I helped Lily with her kindergarten homework, taught her to bake my grandmother's chocolate chip cookies, read her bedtime stories when Maria had to work evening shifts. I attended her school programs, cheered at her soccer games, and celebrated her 6th birthday with a party in my backyard. Maria and I became genuine friends too. She would come over for coffee after Lily was in bed, and we'd talk about everything from parenting challenges to her dreams of eventually going back to school to become a nurse. I helped her navigate the sometimes complicated world of small-town life, introduced her to other young mothers, and provided the kind of emotional support that comes from having someone in your corner who believes in you. In return, they gave me purpose, joy, and a sense of family I'd never experienced before. My house, which had felt too quiet and too empty after James died, was filled with laughter and energy. My days, which had sometimes stretched endlessly with little to fill them, were structured around school pickups and soccer practices and bedtime routines. I wasn't just Lily's here grandma. She was my here granddaughter, and Maria had become like the daughter I'd never had. Which is why I'm so nervous about today's Grandparents' Day event. This will be the first time I'll be publicly acknowledged as Lily's grandmother in a school setting. It's one thing to be Grandma Dot in the privacy of our chosen family. It's another thing entirely to claim that role in front of teachers, other parents, and the broader community. But Lily had been so excited when she brought home the invitation 2 weeks ago. Grandma Dot, she called, running into my house after school without knocking, a privilege I'd granted her months ago. Look, we're having Grandparents' Day at school, and I get to bring you. She'd wave the colorful flyer in the air, practically vibrating with excitement. Are you sure you want to bring me, sweetheart? I'd asked gently. I know some of your friends have grandparents who... I want to bring you, Lily had said firmly. You're my grandma. You help me with homework and make me cookies and come to my soccer games. You're the best grandma ever. How could I argue with that? So here I am, checking my lipstick one more time before heading into the school to celebrate my role as Lily Martinez's chosen grandmother. I'm nervous, yes, but I'm also proud. Proud of the relationship we've built, proud of the family we've created, proud to be part of this little girl's life in such a meaningful way. I grab my purse and the small gift I've brought for Lily, a book of fairy tales that belonged to my own grandmother, and walk toward the school entrance. I have no idea that in 2 hours, I'll be standing in front of a room full of families, defending not just my relationship with Lily, but the very definition of what makes a family real. Chapter 2: The Challenge. Riverside Elementary School was decorated with handmade banners and artwork celebrating grandparents when I walked through the front doors. Children's drawings of elderly figures with gray hair and wrinkled smiles lined the hallways, along with essays titled My Special Grandparent and Why I Love My Grandma/Grandpa. The smell of coffee and homemade cookies wafted from the cafeteria, where the main event would take place. First, though, I needed to find Lily's classroom for the individual presentations that would precede the larger celebration. Mrs. Chen. Lily's voice rang out as I approached her 2nd grade classroom. She came running toward me, her blonde curls bouncing, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, pale blue with tiny flowers, clearly new for this special occasion. Hello, my darling girl, I said, opening my arms for the enthusiastic hug she always gave me. You look absolutely beautiful today. Mama bought me this dress special for Grandparents' Day, Lily said, twirling to show it off. She said it was important that I look extra nice for you. My heart warmed at the thought of Maria, who I knew was struggling financially, spending money she could barely afford on a new dress just to make sure Lily felt special on this day. Well, you look like a princess, I said, meaning it completely. Mrs. Chen? a young woman approached us, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Ms. Rodriguez, Lily's teacher. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, shaking her hand. "Wonderful things. Lily talks about her grandma constantly, the cookies you bake together, the stories you read, the way you help her with her homework. It's clear you two have a very special relationship." I felt a flush of pride and happiness. Lily is a remarkable little girl. I'm honored to be part of her life. "Grandma come see my desk." Lily tugged on my hand, leading me into the classroom. "I made you a special picture." Her desk was covered with a hand-drawn portrait labeled "My Grandma in careful second-grade handwriting. The figure in the drawing had black hair, gray now, but Lily always insisted on drawing it the color it had been in the photographs she'd seen of my younger self. Kind eyes behind glasses, and a big smile. We were holding hands in the picture, and there were flowers and hearts scattered around us. "Oh, Lily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is the most beautiful picture I've ever seen." "I made it just for you," she said proudly. "Ms. Rodriguez said all the grandparents would get to see what we made for them, and I wanted yours to be perfect." As we looked at her artwork together, I became aware of other grandparent-grandchild pairs around the classroom. Traditional pairs, mostly elderly white-haired couples with children who clearly shared their genetic features. A few grandfathers with their grandsons talking about sports. Several grandmothers with granddaughters admiring school projects and artwork. And then there was us, a 68-year-old Chinese-American woman and a 7-year-old Latina girl, sharing a bond that wasn't visible in our appearances but was clearly evident in our interactions. Most of the other families smiled politely when they noticed us, but I caught a few curious glances, a few whispered conversations that stopped when I looked in their direction. "Lily, sweetheart," said a woman approaching our little group, "what a lovely picture you've drawn." The woman was probably in her 50s, well-dressed in a way that suggested money and status. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and was wearing what looked like an expensive pantsuit. Behind her stood a girl about Lily's age with similar blonde hair and blue eyes, clearly her granddaughter. "Thank you," Lily said politely. "This is my Grandma Grandma, this is Madison's grandma." "Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "Eleanor Whitmore. And you're—" "Dorothy Chen," I said, shaking her hand. "It's nice to meet you." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes flicked between Lily and me, taking in our obvious lack of family resemblance. "And you're Lily's grandmother?" Something in her tone put me on edge immediately. There was a subtle emphasis on the word grandmother that suggested skepticism. "Yes," I said simply. "How interesting," Mrs. Whitmore said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I don't think I've met you before. Do you live here in Cedar Ridge?" "I do, on Elm Street." "And you're Maria's mother?" The question was innocent enough on the surface, but I could sense the probing nature behind it. Mrs. Whitmore was fishing for information, trying to understand our family connection. "No," I said calmly. "I'm not Maria's mother." "Oh," Mrs. Whitmore's eyebrows rose in exaggerated surprise. "So you're Lily's father's mother then?" Lily had gone back to showing me her other school projects, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension in the adult conversation happening above her head. "No," I said again, keeping my voice pleasant but firm. "I'm not related to Lily by blood or marriage. I'm her chosen grandmother." Mrs. Whitmore's expression shifted, becoming more pointed. Her chosen grandmother. How modern. The word modern was delivered with just enough disdain to make her meaning clear. "Yes," I said, refusing to be baited. "Very modern, and very wonderful." "I see." Mrs. Whitmore glanced around the classroom, as if checking to see who else might be listening to our conversation. Well, I suppose that's nice for both of you. Before I could respond, Ms. Rodriguez called for everyone's attention. Grandparents and families, if you could please make your way to the cafeteria, we're ready to begin our main celebration. The migration from classroom to cafeteria was a chattering, excited procession of children pulling their grandparents by the hand, eager to show them off to the larger group. Lily walked between me and Madison, chattering happily about the program they'd prepared for us. The cafeteria had been transformed into a celebration space with round tables covered in paper tablecloths decorated with children's handprints. Each table had a centerpiece made of construction paper flowers, and there was a small stage at the front where the children would perform. "Come on, Grandma Dot," Lily said, pulling me toward a table near the front. "I saved us good seats." As we settled at our table, other families filled in around us. I noticed Mrs. Whitmore and Madison taking seats at the table next to ours, close enough that we'd be able to hear each other's conversations throughout the event. "Ladies and gentlemen, grandparents and families," announced Mrs. Patterson, the school principal, from the small stage. "Welcome to our annual Grandparents' Day celebration. We're so honored to have you here today to celebrate the special relationships between our students and their grandparents." The program began with the second grade classes performing songs they'd learned specifically for the occasion. Lily's class sang "You've Got a Friend in Me" with hand motions, and I felt tears prick my eyes as I watched my little granddaughter beaming at me from the stage. After the performances, Mrs. Patterson invited families to share refreshments and mingle. It was during this social time that the real trouble began. I was helping Lily get a cookie from the dessert table when I overheard Mrs. Whitmore talking to another grandmother at the adjacent table. "Well, it's certainly interesting," Mrs. Whitmore was saying, her voice carrying more than it needed to. "I mean, I suppose anyone can call themselves a grandmother these days." The other woman, whom I didn't recognize, leaned in closer. "What do you mean?" "Oh, that woman over there," Mrs. Whitmore said, and I knew without looking that she was gesturing toward me. "The Chinese woman with the Martinez girl. Apparently, she's the child's chosen grandmother." She put air quotes around the words chosen grandmother, making them sound ridiculous. "I mean, I understand that modern families come in all shapes and sizes," Mrs. Whitmore continued. "But there's something to be said for real family connections, don't you think? Blood relationships, traditional family bonds." "Grandma Dot," Lily said, tugging on my sleeve, "can I have 2 cookies?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying to focus on her instead of the conversation happening mere feet away. But Mrs. Whitmore wasn't finished. "I just worry about what message we're sending to the children," she said, her voice becoming more animated. "That anyone can just decide to be family? That traditional relationships don't matter? What's next? Strangers claiming to be parents?" "Well," said the other woman uncertainly, "if the child is happy and well cared for." "But that's just it," Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. "How do we know she's well cared for? How do we know this woman's motivations? I mean, what kind of person just inserts themselves into a family situation like that?" I felt heat rising in my cheeks, a combination of anger and hurt that made my hands shake slightly as I helped Lily arrange cookies on her napkin. Other families were starting to notice the conversation. Heads were turning, voices were dropping to whispers, and I could feel the weight of curious and judgmental stares. "Maybe we should just mind our own business," suggested the other grandmother quietly. "Oh, I'm not trying to cause trouble," Mrs. Whitmore said with false sweetness. "I just think we should be honest about what's real family and what's pretend." That word, pretend, hit me like a physical blow. "Grandma Dot?" Lily looked up at me with concern. Are you okay? You look sad. I forced a smile for her benefit. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about how proud I am of your performance today. But I wasn't fine. I was devastated. This woman was publicly questioning my relationship with Lily, suggesting that our bond was somehow false or inappropriate, turning what should have been a joyful celebration into a moment of humiliation and doubt. And the worst part was that some of the other families seemed to be listening and nodding along, as if Mrs. Whitmore's concerns were valid, as if there was something suspicious or wrong about a woman loving a child who wasn't biologically related to her. You know what? Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice rising slightly as if she'd made a decision. I think someone should say something. The school should know what's really going on here. My heart sank as I realized what she was planning to do. Mrs. Whitmore stood up from her table and walked toward the front of the cafeteria, where Mrs. Patterson was chatting with other school staff members. Excuse me, Mrs. Patterson, she said loudly enough for half the room to hear. I hope you don't mind, but I have a concern I'd like to share with you. The cafeteria began to quiet as people turned their attention toward the front of the room. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, Madison's grandmother, she continued, gesturing toward her granddaughter, and I'm a bit confused about one of the attendees here today. She turned and pointed directly at me. That woman there claims to be the grandmother of the Martinez child, but she's clearly not a family member. I'm concerned about the school's policies regarding who's allowed to attend family events. Shouldn't there be some verification of actual family relationships? The cafeteria fell completely silent. Every eye in the room was on me, and I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. Lily, who had been focused on her cookies, suddenly looked up and around the room, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand its source. Grandma Dot, she whispered. What's happening? Why is everyone looking at us? Mrs. Patterson looked bewildered by the sudden public confrontation. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm not sure I understand the concern. All of our attendees today were invited by students. But she's not really the child's grandmother, Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. She admitted it herself. She said she's not related by blood or marriage. She's just some woman who decided to call herself a grandmother. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel judgment and curiosity radiating from the other families, could see some parents pulling their children closer as if I were some kind of threat. And I could see Lily's face beginning to crumple as she started to understand that someone was saying something bad about me, about us, about our relationship. That's not your real grandma, Mrs. Whitmore said directly to Lily, her voice carrying clearly across the silent cafeteria. Real grandmothers are family. Real grandmothers are related to you. Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she looked up at me with confusion and hurt. Grandma Dot? She whispered. Are you not my real grandma? It was in that moment, seeing the pain and confusion in my precious granddaughter's eyes, feeling the weight of an entire room's judgment, watching as this woman tried to destroy something beautiful and pure and real, that I felt something shift inside me. I was done being quiet. I was done being polite. I was done allowing someone else to define my family. Mrs. Patterson, clearly uncomfortable with the public scene that was unfolding, tried to restore order. Perhaps we could discuss this privately, she began. But Ms. Rodriguez, Lily's teacher, stepped forward and picked up the microphone that had been used for the earlier announcements. Actually, she said, her voice calm but firm, I think this is exactly the right time and place to discuss what makes a real grandparent. She walked directly over to me and held out the microphone. Mrs. Chen, she said clearly, would you like to tell us about your relationship with Lily? I looked at the microphone, then at Lily's tear-filled eyes, then at the room full of families waiting to hear what I had to say. And I realized that this wasn't just about me and Lily anymore. This was about every non-traditional family in that room, every chosen relationship, every bond that existed outside the narrow definition of what Mrs. Whitmore considered real. I took the microphone. Chapter 3. The Truth Spoken. I stood up slowly, accepting the microphone from Ms. Rodriguez with hands that were steadier than I expected them to be. The cafeteria was absolutely silent. Even the youngest children seemed to sense that something important was happening. Looking out at the sea of faces staring back at me, I saw curiosity, judgment, sympathy, and skepticism in equal measure. But when I looked down at Lily, still sitting beside me with tears threatening to spill over, I saw only confusion and the desperate need for reassurance. That's when I knew exactly what I needed to say. "Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Mrs. Whitmore is absolutely right about one thing. I am not Lily's biological grandmother. I am not related to her by blood or marriage. I did not know her when she was born. I was not present for her first steps or her first words, and I have no legal claim to her whatsoever." I could see Mrs. Whitmore nodding with satisfaction, clearly thinking I was conceding her point. "But," I continued, "I would like to tell you what kind of grandmother I am, if you'll allow me." I knelt down next to Lily's chair so we were at eye level, speaking to her as much as to the room full of people watching us. "Lily, sweetie, do you remember the first time we met?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You were crying in the grocery store because you couldn't find your mama. Do you remember what I did?" "You helped me find her," Lily said in a small voice. "That's right. I helped you find her. And do you remember what happened the next week when your mama's car wouldn't start?" "You called Tony to fix it." "I did. And what happened after that?" Lily's voice got a little stronger. "You started being my friend. And then my grandma." I turned back to the microphone, standing up but keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder. 18 months ago, I met a 5-year-old girl who needed someone to care about her, and a young mother who needed support in raising her daughter. I was a widow with no children of my own, grieving the loss of my husband and struggling with loneliness. We found each other not through biology, but through need and kindness and the simple recognition that we could make each other's lives better. I looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore as I continued. "Since then, I have attended every single one of Lily's soccer games, even the ones that were rained out and rescheduled 3 times. I have helped her with homework every Tuesday and Thursday when her mother works late shifts. I have taken her to the emergency room twice, once for a playground accident, once for a fever that spiked to 104 degrees at midnight. I have taught her to bake chocolate chip cookies and to plant tomatoes in a garden. I have read her Goodnight Moon approximately 200 times, and The Very Hungry Caterpillar at least as many. I have sat up with her during thunderstorms because she's afraid of loud noises, and I have celebrated every single A on every single spelling test she's brought home." Lily was smiling now, the tears drying on her cheeks as she listened to me recount our shared experiences. "I have attended school conferences with her mother, contributed to fundraisers for her classroom, and volunteered to chaperone field trips. I know that she's allergic to strawberries, that her favorite color is purple, that she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, and that she sleeps with a stuffed elephant named Peanut." I paused, looking around the room at faces that were now showing more interest than judgment. I know these things not because I share DNA with this child, but because I show up. Day after day, week after week, month after month, I show up. Mrs. Rodriguez was nodding encouragingly, and I could see several other teachers and parents who seemed to be listening with genuine attention rather than skepticism. "Mrs. Whitmore asked what makes a real grandmother," I continued. I would suggest that it's not the circumstances of genetics or marriage that brought you into a child's life. It's what you do once you're there. I looked down at Lily again, speaking directly to her. A real grandmother is someone who loves you unconditionally, who supports your dreams, who comforts you when you're scared, who celebrates your victories, and helps you learn from your mistakes. A real grandmother is someone who shows up not because they have to, but because they choose to, again and again and again. A real grandmother is someone who sees you not as an obligation inherited through family connection, but as a gift that has enriched their life beyond measure. Lily stood up on her chair and wrapped her arms around my neck, whispering loudly enough for the microphone to pick up, "You're my real grandma, Grandma Dot. You're the realest grandma ever." The wave of W's that rippled through the audience was audible, and I could see several people wiping their eyes. But I wasn't finished. "I want to address something else that Mrs. Whitmore mentioned," I said, gently disentangling myself from Lily's hug but keeping her close. She questioned my motivations, suggested that there was something suspicious about my relationship with this family. I looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore, who was now looking considerably less confident than she had when she'd started this public confrontation. "I want to be very clear about my motivations. I am here because 18 months ago, I met a remarkable little girl and her brave young mother, and they changed my life. Before I met them, I was a lonely widow counting down days in an empty house. After I met them, I became someone with purpose, someone with family, someone with joy. My motivation is love, pure and simple. I love this child and her mother, and they love me back. We chose each other, and we keep choosing each other every single day." I turned to address the broader audience. How many of you have family members, blood relatives, who are absent from your lives? How many of you have siblings who don't call, parents who live across the country, children who are too busy for regular contact? Several heads nodded around the room. And how many of you have people in your lives who aren't related to you but who feel like family? Neighbors who check on your elderly parents, friends who show up when you're in the hospital, colleagues who remember your children's birthdays? More nodding, and I could see recognition dawning on several faces. Family isn't just biology. It's commitment. It's presence. It's love expressed through action, day after day after day. I knelt down next to Lily again. "Lily, honey, remember last month when you had that nightmare about monsters in your closet?" She nodded. "What did I do?" "You came over in your pajamas at midnight and checked my whole room for monsters, and then you slept in my room on the floor until morning." "That's right. And remember 2 weeks ago when you were nervous about your presentation on butterflies? You helped me practice it 20 times, and you made me index cards with pictures, and you told me I was brave enough to do anything. And what about last Saturday when you fell off your bike and scraped your knee? You cleaned it up and put on a frozen Band-Aid and made me special hot chocolate with extra marshmallows to make me feel better." That's exactly right. I stood up and faced the audience again. Those are the moments that make someone a real grandmother. Not the moment of birth, not the sharing of DNA, but all the little moments in between when you choose to love, to comfort, to support, to show up. I could see Maria standing in the back of the cafeteria. She must have slipped in during my speech, probably on her break from the diner. She was crying, her hand pressed to her mouth, watching as I defended our chosen family in front of the entire school community. "Maria Martinez is one of the strongest, most devoted mothers I have ever known," I continued, gesturing toward her. "She works 2 jobs to support her daughter. She reads to her every night despite being exhausted. She never misses a school conference or a soccer game. She moved to a new town where she knew no one, started over from nothing, all to give her child a better life. And when she realized that her daughter could benefit from having a grandmother figure, from having someone with more time and resources to provide additional support and attention, she had the wisdom and generosity to allow me into their lives. That's not weakness or failure on Maria's part. That's the mark of an exceptional mother who puts her child's needs above her own pride or fear. Maria was openly crying now, and several other parents had turned to look at her with what appeared to be respect and understanding rather than judgment. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said, addressing her directly, "you spoke about traditional family values and real relationships. I respect your perspective, and I understand that my relationship with Lily might seem unconventional to you." Mrs. Whitmore had the grace to look somewhat ashamed of the scene she'd created, but she was listening. "But I would ask you to consider this. Is love less real when it's chosen rather than inherited? Is commitment less meaningful when it's voluntary rather than obligatory? Is family less valid when it's built on mutual need and genuine affection rather than genetic coincidence?" I paused, letting the questions hang in the air. Because if you believe that only blood relationships matter, then you're dismissing every adoptive parent, every step-parent, every foster family, every mentor, and every chosen family member who has ever made a difference in a child's life. You're dismissing the single fathers who step up to raise children who aren't biologically theirs, the grandparents who take in grandchildren from troubled homes, the teachers who become second mothers to students who need them, the neighbors who provide stability when biological families fail. I could see heads nodding more enthusiastically now, and several people were looking at Mrs. Whitmore with expressions that suggested they were reconsidering her position. "Love," I said firmly, "is not diminished by being chosen. If anything, it's strengthened by it." Ms. Rodriguez stepped forward and took the microphone back for a moment. "I'd like to add something, if I may," she said. "I've been Lily's teacher for 2 months now, and I can tell you that she is one of the most confident, well-adjusted, loved children in my classroom. She talks about her grandma constantly, the things they do together, the lessons she's learning, the unconditional support she receives. Whatever this relationship is, whatever you want to call it, it is clearly benefiting this child enormously." She handed the microphone back to me. "And from an educational standpoint," I added, "studies consistently show that children who have strong relationships with caring adults, regardless of biological connection, perform better academically, have higher self-esteem, and develop better social skills. Lily is thriving because she has multiple adults in her life who love her and invest in her success. How is that anything but wonderful?" I knelt down next to Lily one more time. "Lily, sweetheart, I want you to remember something very important. Family isn't about how you got someone. It's about how you love them once they're in your life. Do you understand?" She nodded solemnly. "You are my granddaughter not because of biology, but because of choice. Because I choose to love you, and you choose to love me back. Because we choose to be family together. Does that make our relationship less real?" "No," Lily said emphatically. "It makes it more special because we picked each other." The audience erupted in applause, and I could see that even some of the people who had initially seemed skeptical were now clapping enthusiastically. But the most important response came from an unexpected source. Madison, Mrs. Whitmore's granddaughter, had been listening to everything with the intense focus that children bring to adult conversations when they sense something important is happening. Now she tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. "Grandma Eleanor," she said in a voice that carried further than she probably intended, "I think Lily's really lucky. She got to choose her grandma, and her grandma chose her back. That sounds really nice." Mrs. Whitmore looked down at her granddaughter, and I could see something shift in her expression, embarrassment, perhaps, or recognition of how her behavior must have appeared through the eyes of a child. And besides, Madison continued with the logical directness of a 7-year-old, Mrs. Chen seems really nice. She helped Lily when she was lost, and she takes care of her when she's sick, and she comes to her soccer games. Isn't that what grandmas are supposed to do? The wisdom of children, I thought. Sometimes it takes a 7-year-old to cut through all the complexity and get to the heart of what really matters. Mrs. Whitmore knelt down next to Madison, speaking quietly but not quietly enough to avoid the microphone. "You're right, sweetheart," she said. "I think I may have been mistaken about some things." She stood up and walked toward me, her face flushed with what I hoped was understanding rather than continued anger. "Mrs. Chen," she said, extending her hand, "I owe you an apology, a sincere apology. I spoke out of assumptions and perhaps some prejudices that I need to examine in myself." I shook her hand, seeing genuine remorse in her eyes. "What you've described, your relationship with Lily and her mother, it sounds like exactly the kind of loving, supportive connection that every child deserves. I was wrong to question it, and I was especially wrong to do so publicly." "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate your honesty." Mrs. Whitmore looked around the room at all the faces watching our exchange. "I think," she said, raising her voice slightly so everyone could hear, "I learned something important today about what makes a family real. And I think our children learned something important too." She turned to Lily, who had been watching this adult interaction with intense curiosity. "Lily, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings or made you sad. You're very lucky to have someone who loves you as much as Mrs. Chen clearly does." Lily, with the forgiving nature of children, smiled at Mrs. Whitmore. "It's okay," she said. "And you can call her Grandma Dot if you want. She likes that." The laughter that rippled through the audience was warm and genuine, the kind of laughter that comes after tension has been released and understanding has been reached. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward to take control of the event again. "Well," she said, "I think we've all learned something valuable today about the many different ways that families can be formed and love can be expressed. Mrs. Chen, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's clear that Lily is incredibly fortunate to have you in her life, and our school community is better for having both of you as part of it." She turned to address the broader audience. "I hope everyone will take a moment to reflect on the families represented here today. Biological families, adoptive families, blended families, and chosen families. What makes each of them special is not their structure, but their love." As the formal program concluded and families began to mingle again, something remarkable happened. Instead of the awkward avoidance I had expected, people approached me. A grandmother whose grandson was being raised by his aunt came over to share her own story of non-traditional family arrangements. A single father talked about the mentor who had become like a grandfather to his daughter. A teacher mentioned the former student who still called her a school mom 15 years after graduation. Story after story of chosen family, of love that transcended genetics, of relationships that had formed out of need and grown into something beautiful and lasting. But the most meaningful conversation came from an unexpected source. "Mrs. Chen?" A soft voice behind me made me turn around. It was a girl I didn't recognize, probably 9 or 10 years old, with dark hair and shy eyes. "Yes, sweetheart?" "I just wanted to say, what you said about choosing family. That made me feel really good." "Oh, why is that?" The girl looked around to make sure no adults were listening, then leaned closer. "Because my mom and dad got divorced last year, and my mom married my stepdad, and he's really nice and he loves me. But sometimes people ask if he's my real dad, and it makes me feel bad." My heart ached for this child navigating the complex emotions of blended families and societal expectations. "But after hearing you talk about choosing family," she continued, I realized that my stepdad chose to love me even though he didn't have to. And that makes it more special, not less special. That's exactly right, I said, kneeling down to her level. What's your stepdad's name? David. Well, you can tell David that choosing to love someone is one of the most beautiful things a person can do. And you can tell yourself that you're very lucky to have someone who chose you. The girl beamed and ran back to her family, leaving me with the profound realization that my words hadn't just defended my relationship with Lily, they had helped other children understand and value their own non-traditional family structures. As the afternoon wound down and families began to leave, Maria approached me with Lily skipping alongside her. Dorothy, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I don't even know how to thank you for what you did today. You don't need to thank me, Maria. I was just telling the truth. But you stood up for us. You stood up for our family when someone tried to tear it down. You made sure Lily knew that our love is real and valid and important. Lily grabbed my hand and swung it back and forth. Grandma Dot, are you glad you're my grandma? Lily, being your grandmother is the greatest joy of my life. Even though people might say mean things sometimes. Especially then, because that's when you know that love is worth fighting for. As we walked out of the school together, Maria, Lily, and me, our little chosen family, I reflected on what had happened that afternoon. Mrs. Whitmore had challenged my right to call myself Lily's grandmother, had questioned the validity of our relationship, had suggested that only biological connections could create real family bonds. But in responding to that challenge, and being forced to articulate exactly what made our relationship meaningful, I had discovered something profound. Our love was not lessened by being unconventional. It was strengthened by being chosen. And in sharing our story publicly, we had given other non-traditional families permission to value their own chosen connections, their own non-biological bonds, their own definitions of what makes a family real. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when we're forced to defend what we love. Sometimes the most powerful truths emerge when someone challenges us to prove what we know in our hearts. That afternoon, in front of a room full of strangers, I had claimed my identity as Lily's grandmother, not in spite of our lack of biological connection, but because of the depth of our chosen connection. And in doing so, I had learned that the realest families are often the ones we build ourselves, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. Chapter 4: The Ripple Effect. 6 months after Grandparents' Day, the impact of that afternoon continued to unfold in ways I never could have anticipated. What had started as a single moment of standing up for our chosen family had rippled outward, touching lives and changing perspectives throughout our small community. It began with small changes at Riverside Elementary itself. Mrs. Patterson called me 2 weeks after the event to ask if I would be willing to participate in a panel discussion for their upcoming Family Diversity Week. Mrs. Chen, she said over the phone, your speech really opened our eyes to some assumptions we've been making about family structures. We'd love to have you share your perspective with other classes, if you're comfortable with that. The panel ended up including me, a single father raising his daughter with help from his sister, a lesbian couple who had adopted 2 brothers, and a grandmother who was raising her grandson while his parents struggled with addiction issues. We spoke to classes from kindergarten through 5th grade, fielding questions from children who were hungry to understand that their own family situations, whatever they might be, were valid and valuable. Mrs. Chen asked a 3rd grader whose parents were divorced, how do you know if someone really loves you if they're not your real family? Sweetie, I answered, real love shows up in actions, not in blood tests. If someone takes care of you when you're sick, celebrates your victories, comforts you when you're sad, and chooses to be present in your life day after day, that's real love. But the changes weren't limited to the school. Word of what had happened at Grandparents' Day spread through Cedar Ridge's tight-knit community, sparking conversations in unexpected places. At Miller's Market, where I'd first met Lily, the cashier Mrs. Johnson mentioned that she'd heard about my speech and wanted to share her own story about the neighbor who had become like a grandmother to her children after her mother passed away. At the post office, Mr. Williams told me about his adopted grandson, the son of family friends who had been deployed overseas, who had been staying with the Williams family for 2 years and had become as much a part of their family as any biological grandchild. Even Dr. Hansen, my primary care physician, brought up the topic during my annual physical. "Dorothy," she said as she checked my blood pressure, "I heard about what happened at the school event. I want you to know that some of us in the medical community have been talking about expanding our definition of family contacts in medical situations." "What do you mean?" "Well, currently our forms only recognize biological family or legal guardians as emergency contacts or people authorized to make medical decisions. But we're realizing that many of our patients have chosen family members who are more involved and more knowledgeable about their care than their biological relatives." It was a small change, but a meaningful one. Recognition that family relationships based on love and commitment deserve the same legal and medical acknowledgement as those based on genetics. The most significant change, though, came from an unexpected source. 3 months after Grandparents' Day, I received a phone call from Eleanor Whitmore. "Mrs. Chen," she said, her voice somewhat hesitant, "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the school directory." "Not at all, Mrs. Whitmore. How can I help you?" "Well, I wanted to follow up on our encounter at the school event. I've been doing a lot of thinking since then, and I realize I owe you more than just a public apology." She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "The truth is, your speech that day forced me to confront some things about my own family situation that I've been avoiding." "Oh?" "My son, Madison's father, he and I have been estranged for 3 years. It started over his choice to marry someone I didn't approve of, and it escalated when I made some comments about how their marriage wouldn't last and how they weren't suitable parents." I waited, sensing that she needed to tell this story at her own pace. I convinced myself that I was protecting family values, that I was standing up for traditional standards. But what I was really doing was letting my prejudices and my need to control the situation drive away my own son and daughter-in-law. I've been seeing Madison every other weekend because my ex-husband arranges it, but I haven't spoken to her parents in 2 years. I've missed birthdays, school events, important milestones, all because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Please, call me Eleanor, and please let me finish, because this is hard for me to say." She took a deep breath. "When I challenged your relationship with Lily, I was operating from this belief that family relationships should fit into neat traditional categories. But after hearing you describe the love and commitment and daily presence that defines your role in Lily's life, I realized I've been focusing on the wrong things. My son's wife isn't the person I would have chosen for him, but she loves him, and she's a devoted mother to Madison. She shows up every day, she makes him happy, she's building a stable, loving home for their family. Isn't that what actually matters? Meanwhile, the real grandmother with the biological connection, have been absent and judgmental and more concerned with being right than with being loving." I could hear tears in her voice now. "Your relationship with Lily made me realize that being family isn't about genetics or traditions or meeting someone else's expectations. It's about love expressed through action. It's about choosing to be present and supportive and caring, day after day. And I haven't been doing that. I've been the opposite of what a grandmother should be." "Eleanor," I said gently, "it's never too late to change that." "That's what I'm hoping. That's why I'm calling. I reached out to my son last week for the first time in 2 years. I apologized for my behavior, for my judgment, for missing so much of Madison's life. How did he respond? He was cautious, hurt, but willing to talk. We had coffee yesterday, and I got to spend time with Madison without the tension and anger that had been there before. She paused again. I told him about what happened at the school event, about how you made me realize that I'd been prioritizing all the wrong things. And you know what he said? What? He said, "Mom, I wish you could see our family the way Mrs. Chen sees hers, as something beautiful that deserves to be celebrated, not something that needs to be fixed or controlled." Eleanor's words hit me with unexpected force. Here was this woman who had publicly challenged my family, now crediting our story with helping her rebuild her own relationships. I wanted to thank you, Dorothy. Not just for forgiving my rudeness that day, but for showing me what real family love looks like. Your example is helping me become a better grandmother to Madison. Eleanor, that means more to me than you know. And I think Madison is very lucky to have a grandmother who cares enough to examine her own behavior and make changes. I hope so. I have a lot of lost time to make up for. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about the unexpected ways that standing up for one relationship had affected so many others. By defending my role as Lily's chosen grandmother, I had inadvertently given other people permission to examine their own definitions of family, their own assumptions about what makes relationships real and meaningful. But the most profound changes were happening within our own little family unit. Maria had been promoted to assistant manager at the diner, partly because her reliability and work ethic had impressed the owner, but also because she gained confidence in herself and her worth, confidence that came, in part, from seeing her choices as a mother validated and celebrated. "Dorothy," she told me one evening as we watched Lily practice cartwheels in my backyard, "I used to worry constantly that I wasn't enough for her. That being a single mother meant she was missing out on something essential. But seeing how you love her, seeing how our chosen family works, it's helped me understand that families don't have to look like the traditional model to be complete and loving and healthy. And more than that, it's helped me realize that reaching out for support, creating connections, building community, that's not a sign of failure as a parent. That's actually good parenting." Lily, meanwhile, had become something of a playground advocate for non-traditional families. Her teacher mentioned that she'd overheard Lily comforting a classmate whose parents were getting divorced, telling him that families can be different shapes and still be full of love. She told him that her mama and her grandma Dot chose to be family, and that choosing family is extra special because it means people really want to be together, Ms. Rodriguez reported with a smile. And me? I had discovered that claiming my identity as Lily's grandmother publicly had deepened my sense of belonging in ways I hadn't expected. I was no longer the woman on the outskirts of family life, grateful for whatever scraps of connection I could find. I was a central figure in a family structure that I had helped create and maintain. More importantly, I had learned that love doesn't require permission from anyone else to be real. It doesn't need validation from society or approval from strangers or recognition from institutions to be meaningful. It just needs to be genuine, consistent, and expressed through daily choices to show up, to care, to invest in another person's well-being and happiness. One year after Grandparents' Day, the three of us were back at Riverside Elementary for Lily's third grade celebration. This time, there was no drama, no challenges to our family structure, no need to defend our relationship. But there was something even better, acceptance and recognition from a community that had learned to see chosen families as just as real and valuable as biological ones. During the program, Mrs. Patterson mentioned the school's new policies around family inclusion, specifically noting that family events were open to all the adults who love and support our students, regardless of their biological or legal relationship. She looked directly at me as she said it, smiling. After the event, as we were gathering our things to leave, a young teacher I didn't recognize approached me. "Mrs. Chen," she said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Miss Garcia, the new kindergarten teacher." "It's nice to meet you, Miss Garcia. I heard about your speech last year, about chosen family and what makes relationships real. I wanted you to know that it influenced how I approach family conferences and classroom discussions about families." She gestured toward a little boy who was cleaning up art supplies nearby. "That's my nephew Carlos. I'm raising him while my sister gets back on her feet after some difficult times. When he started school here, I was nervous about explaining our family situation, worried about how it would be perceived. But hearing your story gave me the confidence to be open about our relationship, to claim my role as his guardian without shame or defensiveness. And the school has been nothing but supportive." Miss Garcia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for showing me that chosen family doesn't need to be hidden or apologized for. It needs to be celebrated." As we walked to the parking lot that day, Maria, Lily, and me, our little trio of chosen family, I reflected on how much had changed since that difficult afternoon when Eleanor Whitmore had challenged our legitimacy. In defending our family, I had discovered its strength. In claiming my role as Lily's grandmother, I had affirmed the value of chosen relationships everywhere. In refusing to be diminished by someone else's narrow definition of family, I had helped expand the conversation about what love looks like in all its forms. But most importantly, I had learned that the realest families are often the ones we create ourselves, not through accident of birth, but through deliberate choices to love, support, and commit to each other's well-being. "Grandma Dot," Lily said as we reached my car, "next year can we invite Eleanor and Madison to sit with us at Grandparents' Day?" I smiled, thinking about how this wise little girl continued to teach me about forgiveness and inclusion. "I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. The more people who love you, the better. And maybe we can invite Miss Garcia and Carlos too, since they're chosen family like us." "Absolutely." As we drove home, I realized that what had started as one woman's challenge to our family had become something much larger, a celebration of all the different ways that people can choose to love each other, support each other, and create lasting bonds that transcend biology. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply claim your truth and live it openly, regardless of who might question or challenge it. Sometimes standing up for your own family means standing up for everyone's right to define family for themselves. And sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply loving someone completely, regardless of whether the world considers that love real or not. In the end, that's exactly what makes it real. Epilogue. 5 years later. Today I'm sitting in the front row of the Cedar Ridge High School auditorium, watching my granddaughter Lily cross the stage to receive an award for her essay on what family means to me. She's 12 now, confident and articulate, with the same blonde curls but a wisdom in her eyes that speaks to all the conversations we've had about love and family and choosing each other. Her essay, which won first place in the county writing contest, is titled "The Grandmother Who Chose Me." In it, she writes about our meeting in the grocery store, about the family we've built together, and about the lesson she learned that day at Grandparents' Day when someone challenged our relationship. "Real family isn't about DNA or biology," she wrote. "It's about the people who show up for you when you need them, who love you when you're not at your best, who choose to be part of your story even when they don't have to be." My Grandma Dot taught me that the most precious relationships are often the ones we choose for ourselves. Maria is sitting beside me, now the manager of the diner and taking night classes to become a registered nurse. She's also engaged to David, a kind man who manages the local hardware store and who has embraced both Maria and Lily with the same wholehearted commitment that I did 8 years ago. Next to Maria sits Eleanor Whitmore, who has become not just a friend, but a co-conspirator in spoiling our granddaughter. She and Madison are regular guests at our Sunday dinners, and Eleanor has become one of the most vocal advocates for inclusive family policies at the school board meetings. "You know," Eleanor whispered to me as we watched Lily accept her award, "I think challenging your family that day was the best mistake I ever made." "How so?" "Because it forced both of us to examine what we really believed about love and family. And it led to you giving that speech that changed so many people's perspectives, including mine." She paused, watching as Lily waved at us from the stage. "But mostly because it led to me understanding that the point isn't to protect some idealized version of what family should look like. The point is to celebrate and support the families that actually exist, in all their beautiful, messy, imperfect forms." After the ceremony, as families gathered in the lobby for refreshments, I was approached by a young woman I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Chen," she said, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Walsh, and I teach family studies at the community college." "It's nice to meet you, Jennifer. I've been following your story for years, ever since that speech you gave at the elementary school. I actually use a recording of it in my classes when we discuss family structures and chosen relationships." I was surprised. "Really?" "Oh yes, it's become something of a legend in family studies circles. We call it the Grandparents' Day speech, and it's helped countless students understand that family is defined by love and commitment, not just biology." She pulled out a business card. "I'm wondering if you'd be interested in speaking to my classes sometime. We have a lot of students who are navigating non-traditional family situations, single parents, blended families, chosen families, students who are estranged from biological relatives but have found family elsewhere. Your perspective would be incredibly valuable to them." I took her card, thinking about how one moment of standing up for my family had rippled out into educational settings, policy changes, and countless individual situations where people needed permission to value their chosen relationships. "I'd be honored," I said. As the evening wound down and families began to leave, Lily bounded over to where I was standing with Maria and Eleanor. "Grandma Dot," she said, launching herself into my arms with the enthusiasm she'd never outgrown. "Did you hear my essay? Did you like it?" "I loved it, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you for writing something so honest and beautiful. I wrote it about you because you taught me that family is about choice, not just chance. And I wanted other kids to know that if they have chosen family too, it's just as real and important as biological family." She paused, looking thoughtful. "Besides, I think our story is important. I think people need to hear about families like ours." Maria smiled, putting her arm around both of us. "You know what I realized tonight?" she said. 8 years ago, when I moved to Cedar Ridge with a 5-year-old and no family nearby, I was so worried about what we were missing. I thought Lily was disadvantaged because she didn't have grandparents or aunts and uncles or the big extended family network that some kids have. But look at us now. Look at the family we've built. Eleanor and Madison, David and his parents who have welcomed us completely, all the friends who have become like family, the community that has embraced us. Lily doesn't have less family than other kids. She has more family, because we've been intentional about creating connections and nurturing relationships and choosing to love each other." As we walked out to the parking lot together, Maria, David, Eleanor, Madison, Lily, and me, our chosen family constellation, I thought about how profoundly my life had changed since that day in the grocery store when I met a crying little girl and her exhausted mother. I had gained not just a granddaughter, but an entire family network. Not just a role to play, but a purpose that had brought meaning to my retirement years. Not just two people to love, but a community that had learned to see chosen relationships as valuable and real. "Grandma Dot," Lily said as we reached our cars. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for choosing me back, sweetheart." "Are you glad that lady was mean to us at Grandparents' Day all those years ago?" I considered the question seriously. Eleanor laughed and shook her head. "Well," I said, "I'm glad it led to important conversations about family and love. I'm glad it helped other people understand that chosen relationships are real and valuable. And I'm glad it eventually led to Eleanor becoming part of our family too. But mostly, I'm glad that no one's opinion could change the fact that we love each other and choose each other every single day." Lily nodded solemnly, then brightened. "And I'm glad that now everyone knows that the realest families are the ones where people choose to love each other on purpose." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with a challenge to our legitimacy, a public questioning of our right to call ourselves family. But it had become something much more significant, a celebration of chosen love, a recognition that families come in countless forms, and a testament to the power of standing up for what you know to be true in your heart. The woman who had challenged my role as Lily's grandmother had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to claim that role publicly, proudly, and permanently. Sometimes the most important things we do arise from moments when we're forced to defend what we love. Sometimes the most powerful truths emerge when someone demands that we prove what we know in our hearts. And sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose for ourselves, one day at a time, one act of love at a time, one decision to show up at a time. Lily Martinez and I chose each other 8 years ago in a grocery store, and we've been choosing each other every day since. That choice has created not just a grandmother-granddaughter relationship, but a family network, a community understanding, and a legacy of love that extends far beyond our original connection. In the end, that's what makes a family real. Not the circumstances that bring you together, but the commitment to stay together through all the circumstances that follow. And that commitment, that daily choice to love and support and show up for each other, is the most real thing of all. The strongest families are not always the ones that begin with shared DNA, but the ones that grow through shared commitment. The most powerful love is not always inherited through genetics, but chosen through daily acts of care, support, and presence. When we open our hearts to the possibility that family can be created rather than just inherited, we discover that love has no boundaries except the ones we impose on ourselves. The realest families are often the ones we build ourselves, person by person, choice by choice, moment of love by moment of love.